Welcome to part 2 of my Millennium Falcon restoration. In part 1 you saw me take this Falcon apart, give it a thorough clean, and also repair the front leg. In this episode we're going to do a few more bits of repair to this Falcon to sort of take it up to the next level. First off, I want to remove the final few bits of sort of staining that are on the top of the Falcon. These are left from where the glue of the stickers sort of left a mark. And the best way to remove these is to use some lighter fluid. You'll need a little Q-tip like that, and if you just put a bit of lighter fluid on the Q-tip, you can then rub the area that has the sticker residue on it, and you'll see that the sort of the remains of the sticker just start to slowly disappear. It takes a little bit of rubbing, and you need to rub with some sort of a minor amount of force just to sort of get it shifting. If bits of it don't want to come away, just use a nail to rub it and it will come off. And there you have it. That's the residue of that sticker is now removed. It's as clean as you can possibly get. The access ramp on this Falcon has a broken hinge clip here. As you can see on the bottom of the ramp there are two small sort of curved sections, and there should be another one on the top, and this clips into a joint on the Falcon. On this one it's snapped away, so I need to recreate this joint. And how I'm going to do this is I have a piece of grey plastic tubing here. As you can see, it's hollow at one end, and the grey is actually quite a good match for the colour of the Falcon. This bit of plastic was in a pair of shoes that my partner bought, and when she threw away all the stuff inside, I decided to keep this because I thought it looks useful. So and this is the first time I'm actually going to use it for something, so hopefully this will work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a small piece of this plastic, the same length as the hinge that should have been on this originally. So it looks like it's about 1 centimetre long. So I'll just use a knife here to carefully cut a piece of this. This plastic seems quite soft, so I'm guessing if I just roll the knife across this plastic to make a nice score mark, I can then break the end of the plastic off with a pair of pliers rather than cutting all the way through it. So there I've just scored all the way around it, and I reckon if I use a pair of pliers like this and just gently twist it, there you go, it's snapped cleanly off. Obviously you won't have the same sort of plastic, but I'm imagining that something like this should be fairly easy to find, a hollow tube, but luckily I have this one already in my toolbox. So now all I need to do is to cut this and make a sort of semicircular shape that should stick onto the top here. So again, I'm just going to use a knife and I will cut this down to make a similar sort of shape. Right, so there we have a rough sort of semicircle. I'm now going to sort of carefully fine-tune this, and I'll end up with something that should look pretty good. So here we have the final piece I've cut. As you can see, it's a semicircular shape, and I've fine-tuned it a bit just to sort of taper that edge. Now what I'm going to do is to super glue this in line here so that it lines up with the two curved areas, as you can see, that are still on the panel. So let's do that. So here we have the final panel. As you can see, the new hinge that I've created is glued in place quite nicely and lines up pretty neatly with the sort of curved section underneath. So if I get the Falcon now, you can see that this panel locks nice and neatly in place there on the little hinge section, and also locks in place when I push it up into the bottom of the Falcon, so it's not going to fall out of the way. And looking from underneath at the ramp, you can see that this now hinges quite nicely down and actually stays in place. It's actually a little bit better than the original ramp fitting. The original ramp fitting would just drop down and pretty often fall off. This new one's nice and stiff, so you can hold it in place, and also it clips up nicely and again holds properly at the bottom of the Falcon. Another issue on this Falcon is that the top part of the cockpit section comes in two pieces. There's a seat that clips over these two pegs here, and then there's a sort of control panel area that clips into these two poles here. This is missing on this Falcon, and it's been snapped off. So there should be two holes here, but currently they are filled with the pegs that were on the bottom of the control panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill those out. So at some point I hope to find a replacement control panel which I can then slot back into these two holes, but before I even find that, I'm going to drill these out and make the holes open again so that I can easily slot something back in there. So here you can see where I've drilled out the two holes. There's no longer the remnants of the blue pegs from the broken cockpit section. So hopefully now I can find one of these on eBay and just slot this back in place. And in the meantime, I'll get on with the rest of the restoration. The final thing I need to fix and check before I put the body of the Falcon back together is the motor that makes the sort of laser sound. Here's the motor that I removed earlier. This just sort of clips back in place. There is a bracket to hold it on, but I'm not actually going to screw that in just for the moment. Before I put this back in, the contacts on the side of this motor I've just sanded and filed a little bit just to make sure that they're good and clean and shiny, because they tend to get quite corroded. So you just need to make sure that they're filed so they're nice and shiny before you put that back in. You can do the same on the door switch as well. The switch is a very simple mechanism with a spring that you just push that and it pushes two contacts in. So make sure that you file those down a bit just to make sure they're sort of nice and shiny again. I've also noticed a common problem with this door is that these contacts actually get bent out of shape. So it's a good idea just to bend them slightly in a bit and sort of curve this portion back around like that. So that they definitely touch the battery contacts. Quite often one or both of these contacts don't make contact with the battery itself, so it just doesn't work at all. So just make sure that that's sort of bent a little bit more. Put that in place. So now we need to put some batteries in. Again, like I've done with previous of sort of restorations and wiring stuff, I've not bothered buying the right size batteries. C batteries are quite expensive still, so you can buy these converters that will convert a AA battery to a C type battery. These cost, I bought 4 of these for £1 on eBay, so very, very cheap and cheerful, but they work great. So you just put a AA battery in and it does the job. So got 2 of those. Let's put those in place, and hopefully this motor should just work if I put it in and press everything. As you can see there, it's making the laser noise. So I can now go ahead and screw the motor back in, and that's that part finished. So now it's just a case of putting the Falcon back together again. Again, this is a fairly simple job. There are 4 of these panels. You get 2 long panels and 2 shorter panels like that. The long panels go at on the sort of front prongs of the Falcon here. Very easy to work out which way round they go. You've got 2 longer sort of pegs here and 2 short ones. The long ones go this end, and then the short ones clip over onto the front like that. And they just sort of push in place. It's a fairly rubbery plastic, so it goes in quite easily. And the other one goes on the other side like so. Just make sure they're sort of well pushed into the little peg holes, and that should be good to go. And then you have 2 shorter panels like this one. Again, these go at the back here. This one is a slightly different fixing method. There's a sort of L-shaped clip that just slides in, and then another peg that slots in place there, and you've got one final one on the other side of the ship like so. There was a slight fail there when I put that last panel back in. The tiny little L-shaped clip that holds part of it on actually snapped off just as I was putting it back in. It was obviously already a bit worn and not in such good condition. These pieces actually pop up on eBay fairly easily, so I could probably just buy one, but in this instance I'm just going to use some super glue to fix it, as this is a fairly easy panel. It doesn't get a lot of sort of action. It's not sort of something that you can rotate or pull at all on the side of the ship, so a little bit of super glue like that should just be enough to hold it in place. I may even actually glue this one on to the ship just to give it an extra bit of strength, because no one's ever going to remove it again. Okay, so here we have the panel I've just glued the tab on. Because I'm a little bit worried that it's actually going to snap off, I think I'm also actually going to glue this onto the ship itself. This panel is only sort of added detail. You don't ever rotate it or anything like that, so I think if I just put a small amount of super glue onto this end here, which is the weak end, not the weak end, but it's the weak end of the panel, and I can just rotate that in place very carefully. I don't want to push it too hard because it may snap. Let's just get that end in place. So the final piece to put in is the cardboard insert. This one that came with this ship it's a little bit tatty around the edges, and again, you can pick these up off eBay quite easily. People seem to strip the ships apart quite a lot, and you'll be able to get a replacement one. But actually, I think this one is good enough. By the time I put it back in place, and as long as I make sure that it actually fits in all of the little curves and corners, it should work fine. It's a fairly fiddly little job to get this in, because you've got to go around lots of corners and make sure everything is clipped in properly. It's not the easiest thing to do with a camera in front of you, but it can be done. So there you go, it's all sort of shaped like that. Then once it's in, I can bend up the slightly bent corners of the top just to make sure it's nice and straight. And now we can put the top back on. So here's the top of the Falcon, and this just goes over like that. And again, you need to make sure that all the cardboard pieces are slotted in the right slots on the top. What you'll need is a pair of tweezers or something, so that you can just make sure everything is in the right place and not being distorted or bent by the plastic of the ship. It takes a little practice and a little fiddling, but you will get it all in place in the end. So once you're happy that everything is sort of clipped nicely back in place, so you turn the ship over and screw it all back together. This is a pretty boring job, so I won't bother filming it. So this is the end of part 2 of my Falcon restoration. As you can see, the ship is now back together. It's all nice and clean. The electronics work, and I've managed to fix the ramp at the bottom, which now, as you can see, holds in place quite nicely. So join me in part 3 when I will continue to sort of repair all the bits that I have left for this, and also try and purchase the remaining few missing pieces that I need. I obviously need bits for the gunner's chair, and I'm missing the front console part of the cockpit. I have the rest of the cockpit, but not the console part, so without that the cockpit doesn't hold in place. So yeah, join me in part 3 and I will continue this restoration and get this Falcon looking like it should have done when it came out of the shop. Thanks for watching.